How do you make sense of the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy? Do you grapple with its mysteries, embracing the newness amidst deviations from the beloved source material? Have you reckoned with the arbiters of fate and the merging of worlds, of villainous ambitions, of lost loves reunited and budding loves endangered? How do you make sense of it all? Or do you even try? I've tried to make sense of these mysteries for nearly 4 years, like many of you. And now, just before the release of the sequel, I'm ready to talk about some of these thoughts. So in this series, I'm going to share a few lenses from my areas of research. Research based in religious theology, spirituality, and myth that have helped me make some sense of this game. Now, these aren't answers, nor are they even theories. That's why I call them lenses, because they help us see things that we might not otherwise notice. And I believe that there's still a lot we've yet to see in this game. So buckle up, because this series is going to help you see everything differently. This is our Final Fantasy VII lecture series. So let's get started with one of the biggest questions in the entire Final Fantasy VII Remake universe. What's up with the Whispers? Throughout Final Fantasy VII Remake, these robed spirits direct the party in not-so-subtle ways toward their desired outcomes, usually reinforcing the 1997 game's narrative. Now, these guys were not received warmly by many avid fans. Sometimes called plot ghosts, the Whispers seem to gatekeep the events of the original game's plot, with some critics even drawing comparisons to the large swaths of the fandom itself which objected to any alteration of the plot. A stronger critique, however, came from those who felt that the Whispers' inclusion was changing the core themes of life and death to yet another story about defying fate. However, I'm convinced that the Whispers are not only a great addition to the universe, but they actually convey the themes of the original game, maybe even better than the original game itself did. But before we get into that, let's start with what they are, based on one of the game's most important scenes.
Whispers. Perhaps best described as arbiters of fate. They are drawn to those who attempt to alter destiny's course and ensure they do not.
Like capital D? Destiny?
The flow of the great river that is the planet, from inception to oblivion.
And you're saying that that flow is somehow fixed?
Yes, for it is the will of the planet itself.
This and several conversations throughout the game point to one specific idea, a concept common in a lot of JRPGs but seldom called exactly what it is. Yet this idea was referred to recently outright by a remake developer in an interview. Kitase said that the questions that need to be asked are, how immutable is what establishes destiny, and how far can we go to fight it? How much of what we do is the result of predestination? So let's pause for a minute to learn a little bit about predestination and fate, because I promise you, this is key to understanding everything about this game. Predestination is a doctrine primarily in Calvinist Christian theology, though traces of it do exist in other religious traditions. It asserts that God has full authority over the cosmos, causing all happenings to bend to the divine will. Predestination includes 3 key concepts: foreknowledge, providence, and governance. When we attribute foreknowledge to God, we mean that all things are known and pre-known in real time by God because they always were and ever continue under the divine eye. To God's knowledge, there's no past or future, but all things are present, omnitemporal, and God truly sees and contemplates them all at once. God is therefore also omniscient. Likewise, providence is the protective care for all these things considered by God. This shows God's intention to preserve a certain direction and flow of his creation's life and to act accordingly. This active governance is how God actively regulates destiny. Everything that happens, regardless of whether they're perceived as good or bad, are employed for the ultimate fulfillment of God's providence. Having accounted for all things through perfect foreknowledge and determined intention toward those things through providence, God can perfectly govern the full destiny of all things. Now, fascinatingly, the records of the divine will are described as being written down in heavenly books, sometimes called the books of life, remembrance, and in some mystic communities, destiny. It's a curious analogy because by making them tangible, if someone were to pick them up and read these texts, well, they'd gain the knowledge of the secret divine will, and therefore they could possibly subvert it. But we'll get to that. Omniscient, omnitemporal, omnipotent. These make up the divine attributes afforded God through a theology of predestination, and this understanding can really help us think more deeply about the Lifestream, the Whispers, and even key characters in Final Fantasy VII Remake. Alright, so if we use predestination as a lens, what are the implications? What does it matter? Well, first of all, it could impact the way we understand the Lifestream itself. The Lifestream is described as the river of life that circles the planet, giving life to the world and everything in it. It's the essence of the planet itself and contains all the memories, emotions, and knowledge of those who live. In Final Fantasy VII Remake, the Lifestream seems to also contain memories of future events as well, which makes sense to some degree because it contains all life that has ever existed and ever will exist. Therefore, the Lifestream can contain within it an awareness of all potentialities and outcomes based on a perfect knowledge of the life forms that make it up. Yet, the Lifestream is not merely a fount of knowledge. It has a will and a directive all of its own, a core motivation for self-sustainment. As Bugenhagen says, the planet will decide what is best for the planet and what is bad for the planet. Now, this sounds remarkably similar to the first two aspects of predestination, right? The Lifestream has a perfect compilation of knowledge and therefore a foreknowledge of time and events, even things that have seemingly not happened yet during the events of the game, because the Lifestream is omnitemporal. Practically speaking, having all the memories, experiences, and knowledge of every person and thing that will ever live creates a linear script for existence. With all that knowledge, the Lifestream, like God and religious traditions, is able to act accordingly to enact its own providence, or its interest in protecting and preserving all life. Now, such omniscience creates a blueprint for providence. And again, like the divine, this determines what governing actions should take place. This governance is revealed plainly through the introduction of the Whispers in Remake. They act as agents of the Lifestream, protectors and enforcers of the Lifestream's providence based on the Lifestream's perfect foreknowledge. Now, while controversial, their inclusion shows that the Lifestream is no passive bystander to what's happening. It takes an active role in the destiny of the planet, and it should. As an analogy for the divine, that's what divine beings do. This leads us to Aerith. Aerith is the last surviving Cetra, an ancient race of people who were deeply religious and were said to be able to communicate with the planet. They are in some ways guardians of the planet, caretakers of it, and carry the deepest wisdom of the planet, even knowledge of a place known as the Promised Land, which is of utmost interest to Shinra. Now, like her ancestors, Aerith hears the planet's voice and understands its will. More so than the original game, Final Fantasy VII Remake heavily leans into this by showing Aerith communicating with the planet regularly. For example, in her conversations with garden flowers, or at the game's opening when she intently focuses on a Mako leak in a pipe. This is possibly the moment Aerith becomes aware of the planet's foreknowledge and providential will. This connection with the Lifestream helps explain why Aerith knows the stories of people she's just met, and seems to have an idea of events before they even happen. Not only does Aerith know the planet's will, but she also trusts it implicitly, which explains her cheery and hopeful demeanor even when terrible events occur. This is a classic attribute described in Predestination theology about believers. Listen to what John Calvin has to say. Once the light of divine providence has illumined the believer's soul, they're relieved and set free, not only from the extreme fear and anxiety which formerly oppressed them, but from all care. they can confidently commit themselves to God. This, I say, is their comfort, that their Heavenly Father so embraces all things under His power, so governs them at will by His nod, so regulates them by His wisdom, that nothing takes place save according to His appointment. Aerith's just like that. In the same way, she trusts the planet to do what's necessary for its sustaining. So regardless of how good or bad things get, Aerith trusts it's all in the wisdom and providence of the planet. So she doesn't seek to defy the Whispers, but instead trusts that the destiny they're directing us toward is a good one. At least until she doesn't. Which brings us to Sephiroth. Based on knowledge of the original game, Crisis Core, and this scene from Remake's second chapter, players know that somehow Sephiroth died. But when he died, he fell into the Lifestream and he was able to withstand fully reuniting with its flow. He clarifies what happened during this time in the original game, saying, "I became a traveler of the Lifestream and gained the knowledge and wisdom of the ancients. I also gained the knowledge and wisdom of those after the extinction of the ancients, and soon I will create the future." In Remake, Sephiroth clearly has this knowledge of the planet and, like Aerith, possesses the planet's foreknowledge and understanding of providence. Unlike Aerith, however, Sephiroth does not put his trust in it, perhaps because he knows what the Lifestream wanted to do to him. So he sets out to resist such predetermination and destiny by targeting the governing agents of the planet, the Whispers. And in Chapter 18, Aerith's devoted trust in the process of destiny is shaken by the reality of Sephiroth. It's here that she sees what Sephiroth is doing, and that he actually may succeed in defying the planet's will. As the last remaining Cetra, she knows it is her responsibility to work on the planet's behalf. So in an uncharacteristic departure from her Calvinistic devotion to the Lifestream's will, she says enough. I cannot overstate how pivotal this is to Aerith's character progression, from a confident devotee to the Lifestream to an active defier of it, for good reason. Because there are times in life when a quiet faith and trust is not enough, when thoughts and prayers are rendered impotent to answer the cries of the planet. In the face of human suffering, a faithful action is required, and here, for the first time, Aerith is willing to fight the planet itself for the sake of the planet. A powerful example of faithful heroism.
But this isn't the way it's supposed to be. There's no greater threat to the planet than him. Sephiroth has to be stopped. He has to be. And that's why I'm asking you to help me. I know that together we can do this. But if we do, we'll be changing more than fate itself. If we succeed, if we win, we'll be changing ourselves.
Aerith's remarks remind me of Nietzsche's holistic fatalism, in which he describes a person as a product of belonging to the whole of existence. He argues, to say to an individual, change yourself, means demanding that everything change, even retroactively, thus an impossibility. Yet with the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, everything does appear to change, even retroactively. But how much does everything actually change? Well, that remains to be seen. The climactic result of the party's confrontation with Sephiroth leads to the elimination of the Whispers, effectively thwarting the planet's protective governance, leaving even the planet's foreknowledge and providence vulnerable. Vulnerable to Sephiroth, yes, but also to Jenova, who is somewhere in this mix after being stolen from containment in Shinra Tower. While only briefly explained in Remake, those who played the original know that Jenova is an ancient life form with the ability to meddle with the psyches of those she confronts, which leads to constant confusion for the characters. Now that the Whispers can no longer protect the planet, is it possible that the now freed Jenova might be able to meddle with the psyche of the planet's memory itself, manipulating and remaking the planet's foreknowledge to cause confusion and misdirects? Through a lens of predestination, that's in the realm of possibility, but we'll return to that in our final episode. In the end, when we imagine the Lifestream and the Whispers as analogous to the foreknowledge, the providence, and the governance of God in Predestination, the emphasis on changing fate in Final Fantasy VII's story seems to make a lot of sense. It's still a story of life and death, which is also the focus of predestination theologies. It's just grounded in the idea of divine destiny. More practically, however, fans of the original move through the remake trilogy now wondering whether things will align with the original. Aerith and Sephiroth know the script of the planet, but can now act outside of it. The real question is, what if the original is going to be considered protected by the Whispers, and what's not? Everything is on the table, including that scene. Most of us assume the Whispers would try to keep the same outcome as the original, but what if the planet's will was actually for Aerith's survival, and Sephiroth, even though the Whispers are present, is able to thwart the planet's providence? Without the Lifestream's foreknowledge, providence, and governance, anything is possible, including the return of those who were supposed to be dead. That is a topic for next time. So what do you think? What questions do you have about predestination? How do these ideas help shape your understanding of the story? Does it help confirm any of your theories or ideas? Sound off in the comments and be sure to like and subscribe because you do not want to miss our next episode. Till next time, walk tall, my friends.